Modern life trains your brain to live in fragments, and most people don't realize how deeply this has altered the way they think, focus, and experience time. You may feel like your attention span is broken, like your mind refuses to stay with one thought without drifting, checking, or craving something else. This is not a personal failure or a lack of discipline. It is the predictable outcome of tools that were engineered to capture, divide, and monetize your attention at scale. Certain apps do not merely consume your time, they condition your nervous system to expect constant novelty, instant feedback, and effortless stimulation. Over time, this reshapes how your brain evaluates effort. Deep focus begins to feel uncomfortable. Silence feels restless. Tasks that once required patience now feel unbearable. Your mind learns to associate boredom with threat and stimulation with relief. The problem is not that these apps exist, but that they operate on psychological loops designed to bypass conscious choice. Each swipe, refresh, and notification trains your brain to seek the next hit of novelty before the current thought has a chance to fully form. This constant interruption fractures attention into short bursts, making sustained concentration feel unnatural. What makes this especially dangerous is that the damage is subtle. You may still function, you may still work, scroll, laugh, and respond, but beneath the surface, your ability to sit with complexity, to think deeply, and to engage meaningfully begins to erode. Attention is not just about productivity, it is the foundation of identity, learning, and emotional regulation. When your attention span collapses, so does your capacity for patience, self-control, and long-term thinking. You become more reactive, more impulsive, and more mentally exhausted, even if your life looks relatively normal on the outside. The most concerning part is that these changes feel like you. You start believing that you are naturally distracted, lazy, or unfocused, when in reality, your brain has been trained into this state through repeated exposure. These apps thrive on the illusion of harmlessness. They present themselves as entertainment, connection, or information, but their real function is to keep you engaged for as long as possible, regardless of the cost to your cognition. Over time, they flatten your emotional range. Moments that require effort feel heavy, while trivial stimulation feels urgent. This imbalance creates a cycle where you reach for your phone not because you want to, but because your brain has learned that discomfort should be escaped immediately. Regaining your attention span is not about willpower or discipline alone. It is about removing the triggers that continuously hijack your focus. As long as certain apps remain in your environment, your brain is fighting an uphill battle. Every notification resets your attention. Every endless feed erodes your tolerance for stillness. Deleting them is not an act of restriction, it is an act of self-defense. It creates space for your nervous system to recalibrate, for your mind to relearn how to stay with a single thread of thought, and for your attention to stretch again. At first, this absence feels uncomfortable. You may feel bored, restless, or disconnected, but this discomfort is not a problem. It is a signal that your brain is detoxing from overstimulation. Beneath it lies clarity, depth, and the ability to focus without strain. When you remove the most damaging sources of attention theft, your mind does not become empty, it becomes available. Available for deeper work, richer conversations, and a stronger sense of presence in your own life. Getting your attention span back is not about adding more productivity tools or hacks. It starts with subtraction. It starts by recognizing that not every app deserves access to your mind, and that some forms of convenience come at a cost you can no longer afford to pay. Destroys your attention span is any platform built around endless short-form content. These apps train your brain to expect constant novelty every few seconds, rewarding you for switching attention instead of sustaining it. Each swipe delivers a new stimulus before your mind has time to process the last one, teaching your brain that depth is unnecessary and patience is optional. Over time, this conditions your nervous system to feel restless when stimulation slows down. Tasks that require focus begin to feel unusually difficult, not because they are harder, but because your brain has adapted to rapid reward cycles. What makes this especially harmful is that these platforms blur the line between choice and compulsion. You open them intending to spend a minute, but the design removes natural stopping cues. There is no endpoint, no completion, only continuation. This trains your brain to stay in a passive, reactive state where attention is constantly pulled rather than directed. As a result, your ability to initiate focus weakens. You may notice that even when you want to concentrate, your mind instinctively seeks interruption. This is not a character flaw, it is conditioning. These apps reward scanning, not thinking. They encourage emotional spikes, amusement, outrage, curiosity, without resolution. Your brain becomes accustomed to shallow engagement and begins to resist deeper cognitive effort. When you delete or significantly restrict these apps, the initial withdrawal can feel intense. Your mind may crave stimulation, and silence may feel uncomfortable. But this discomfort is temporary. It is the recalibration phase where your brain begins to relearn how to stay with a single thread of thought. Without constant novelty, your tolerance for stillness increases. Over time, focus stops feeling forced and starts feeling natural again. This is the first major step in reclaiming your attention, removing the tools that profit from fragmenting it. The second type of app that undermines your attention span is any platform built around constant social feedback and comparison. These apps condition your brain to seek external validation in the form of likes, views, messages, and reactions. Each notification acts as a small interruption that pulls your attention outward, reinforcing the habit of checking rather than focusing. Even when you are not actively using these apps, a part of your mind remains on standby, anticipating the next update. This creates a low-level cognitive tension that makes deep concentration difficult. Your brain learns to associate worth and relevance with immediate response, which subtly increases anxiety and reduces patience. Instead of staying with a task, your attention fragments as you unconsciously monitor for social signals. Over time, this weakens your ability to remain present in activities that do not offer instant feedback. Work that requires sustained effort begins to feel unrewarding, while checking for updates feels urgent. This imbalance shifts your motivational system away from intrinsic satisfaction toward external reinforcement. Another hidden cost is constant comparison. Exposure to curated versions of other people's lives trains your mind to evaluate itself continuously. This evaluation consumes mental energy and further scatters attention. You may find yourself replaying interactions, overthinking responses, or mentally rehearsing how you were perceived. All of this pulls cognitive resources away from focus and into rumination. When you remove these apps or limit them, the effect is not just fewer distractions, but a quieter mental environment. Your attention is no longer constantly redirected toward how you are seen or judged. This allows your mind to settle into tasks without the background noise of social evaluation. Over time, your sense of satisfaction shifts back toward progress and engagement rather than validation. Your attention span strengthens, not because you are forcing focus, but because fewer things are demanding it at once. This creates space for deeper work, calmer thinking, and a more stable internal state. The third type of app that erodes your attention span is any platform that disguises urgency as usefulness. These are apps that constantly push alerts, updates, breaking news, and reminders, creating the illusion that you must stay informed at all times. While they may seem practical or necessary, their real impact is the normalization of interruption. Your brain begins to treat every notification as potentially important, even when most are irrelevant or repetitive. This keeps your nervous system in a state of mild alertness, making sustained focus difficult. Instead of entering deep concentration, your mind remains partially open, waiting to be pulled away. Over time, this fragments attention, not through pleasure, but through anxiety. You start feeling that stepping away means falling behind or missing something critical. This fear-based engagement is especially damaging because it trains your brain to associate stillness with risk. Silence feels irresponsible. Focus feels unsafe. The constant flow of information also creates cognitive overload. When your mind is flooded with updates, headlines, and data, it has little capacity left for reflection or synthesis. You consume more, but understand less. Your thoughts become reactive, jumping from one issue to another without depth. When you remove these apps or mute them, the initial discomfort often takes the form of unease or guilt. You may feel disconnected or uninformed, but this feeling fades as your brain adapts. You begin to realize that most information is not urgent, and that being less informed in real time does not make you less capable. In fact, it restores your ability to think clearly and make deliberate decisions. Your attention span improves because your mind is no longer constantly interrupted by artificial urgency. You regain the ability to stay with a single task without anticipating disruption. This shift creates mental calm and clarity, allowing focus to deepen naturally rather than being forced. Deleting these apps is not about rejecting technology or isolating yourself from the world. It is about restoring balance to a system that has been pushed beyond its limits. When you remove the biggest sources of attention fragmentation, your brain begins a slow but powerful recovery. At first, your days may feel quieter, even empty, because your mind is no longer constantly stimulated. But in that quiet, something important returns: continuity. Thoughts stretch longer, conversations feel deeper, tasks regain a sense of flow. Your attention span rebuilds not through effort, but through absence of interference. You stop fighting distraction and start experiencing focus as a natural state again. Over time, your tolerance for complexity increases. You can read longer, think deeper, and stay present without feeling restless. Emotionally, you become less reactive because your nervous system is no longer being constantly triggered. Mentally, you regain the ability to choose where your attention goes instead of surrendering it automatically. This sense of control is subtle, but it changes how you experience life. You feel more grounded, less scattered, and more intentional. The most important shift is identity-based. You stop seeing yourself as someone who lacks focus and start recognizing that your environment was shaping your behavior all along. When the environment changes, so do you. Attention is not something you force into existence, it is something you protect. By deleting or restricting the apps that profit from your distraction, you create conditions where focus can grow again. This is not a one-time fix, but a long-term recalibration. The benefits compound quietly. Weeks turn into months, and what once felt difficult becomes normal. You don't become more productive in a frantic way, you become more present. And presence sustained over time is what allows meaningful work, learning, and fulfillment to take root. Getting your attention span back is less about doing more and more about removing what never belonged there in the first place. Once your attention span begins to return, you start noticing changes that go beyond productivity. Your perception of time shifts. Days no longer feel like a blur of taps, swipes, and interruptions. Moments stretch. You become more aware of your thoughts instead of being pulled away from them mid-formation. This is because attention is not just a mental skill, it's the gateway to awareness. When your attention is constantly fragmented,
Your experience of life becomes fragmented too. You are always partially elsewhere. As distractions fade, presence increases. You listen more fully. You think more clearly. You begin to notice subtleties you previously rushed past. This heightened awareness can feel strange at first, even uncomfortable, because it exposes emotions and thoughts that were previously drowned out by noise. But this discomfort is a sign of reconnection, not regression. Your mind is relearning how to stay with reality instead of escaping it. Over time, this presence becomes grounding. You feel less rushed even when life is busy, because your attention is no longer
across dozens of inputs. You are where you are. That alone reduces mental fatigue more than any productivity trick ever could. As your attention stabilizes, your emotional regulation improves as well. Constant stimulation trains the brain to chase relief, making discomfort feel intolerable. When that stimulation is removed, your tolerance for mild boredom, frustration, and effort increases. This strengthens your emotional resilience. You no longer need to immediately escape uncomfortable states. You can sit with them long enough to respond instead of react. This has a profound effect on decision-making. Impulsive choices decrease. You pause more naturally. You consider consequences instead of seeking immediate relief. This emotional steadiness also reduces anxiety, because anxiety thrives on constant alertness and unresolved tension. With fewer interruptions, your nervous system exits survival mode and enters a more balanced state. You feel calmer not because life is easier, but because your brain is no longer being pushed into overdrive. This calm becomes the new baseline. From this baseline, challenges feel manageable instead of overwhelming. You regain confidence not through hype or motivation, but through internal stability. Another subtle shift occurs in how you relate to effort. When your attention span is damaged, effort feels heavy and unrewarding. You constantly crave a break, a distraction, or a shortcut. As focus returns, effort begins to feel meaningful again. You can stay with a task long enough to experience progress, which makes effort satisfying rather than draining. This creates a positive feedback loop. Focus leads to progress. Progress reinforces focus. Over time, this loop rebuilds your capacity for deep work and learning. You become capable of engaging with complex ideas, long-term goals, and challenging problems without immediate payoff. This is where real growth happens. Skills develop faster. Understanding deepens. You stop needing constant stimulation to stay engaged because engagement itself becomes rewarding. This is not about becoming rigid or joyless. It is about rediscovering the satisfaction that comes from immersion. When your mind is no longer constantly interrupted, it remembers how to enjoy depth. Socially, reclaiming your attention changes how you connect with others. Conversations become more present and less performative. You listen without waiting to check your phone. You respond thoughtfully instead of reflexively. This deepens relationships because attention is one of the clearest signals of respect and care. People feel it when you are fully there. At the same time, you become less influenced by other people's opinions, moods, and online narratives. With fewer external voices competing for your attention, your own values become clearer. You think for yourself more often. This independence is not loud or confrontational. It is quiet and grounded. You are less reactive to trends, outrage, and comparison. Your sense of direction becomes internal rather than socially driven. This makes you harder to manipulate and easier to trust yourself. When your attention is intact, your identity stabilizes. You know what matters to you because you can actually hear your own thoughts. Ultimately, getting your attention span back is about reclaiming agency over your life. Attention determines what grows in your mind, what shapes your emotions, and what influences your future. When it is constantly hijacked, your life becomes reactive.
When it is protected, your life becomes intentional. Deleting these apps is not a punishment or sacrifice. It is a strategic decision to stop leaking your most valuable resource. As attention returns, so does depth, patience, and clarity. You become capable of building things that require time, skills, relationships, understanding, and purpose. This change does not announce itself dramatically. It unfolds quietly, day by day, as your mind becomes less scattered and more whole. And once you experience life with sustained attention, it becomes impossible to unsee how much was taken from you before. You realize that focus is not about doing more, but about being more fully present in what you choose. That presence compounds into a life that feels richer, steadier, and more aligned. This is what you gain when you protect your attention. Not just productivity, but ownership of your inner world.